I'm the director for Common Knowledge Trust, and we produce Birthing Better Childbirth Preparation online course. And today I want to talk to you really about how birth choices became the childbirth trend of today, and really since the 1980s. You know, as women, we all want the same thing for our births, really. We want to have a safe birth. We want to have a good birth, and we'd like to have an easy birth. And really, for most of us, that doesn't really matter where, with whom, or what's happening. We just really want to have a healthy baby and to be healthy for ourselves. And next, we want to have a good experience. We want to look back on the birth of our children and feel that we've had a good experience. And there isn't any woman who wants to have a hard birth, so we all want an easy birth. So how did birth choices really become the predominant trend? And that's important to understand. So back in the 1970s in the United States, women didn't have choices. And where our trust is in New Zealand, women didn't have choices either. And not all women have a political issue around childbirth. There are a small group of really dedicated birth advocates, and they come and go over the years. So when I first gave birth in the 1970s, there was just the beginning movement of birth advocates. And when I came to New Zealand in the 90s, it occurred sort of about the same time there. And it occurred at the same time really in a lot of developing countries, this idea that you could advocate for birth and for birth choices, and therefore for women. So what happened was that birth advocates wanted women, other women, to be able to choose the type of birth that they wanted. Now, in another video, we talked about sort of like the original sin in childbirth, which was from the 50s to the 70s, at least in New Zealand and the United States, there was a skills-based approach to childbirth. That came through women being taught Lamaze or Bradley or birth without fear. The original sin was that these really dedicated male obstetricians focused skills on two goals. One was to achieve a natural birth, and the other was to have a painless labor. But by the 70s, it was apparent that the skills didn't achieve that for too many women who were going down that path. Had those obstetricians originally said, every woman should have birth skills, every father should know how to coach, then we'd be in a different conversation. So the skills-based approach was put aside, and the new birth advocates that came along said, well, skills don't work, therefore let's give women choice. And so birth plans began to be the predominant way that women approached the birth of their babies. And those birth plans were elaborate. And even the simplest birth plan has at least 10 things that you're being asked to decide whether you want or you don't want, or how you want things to go. Because you want things to go in a certain way in order to achieve a healthy baby, health for yourself, a good birth experience that you'll look back on with good memories, and to have an easy experience. So birth plans were set up in order to achieve those goals. So what's happened? Well, I don't have an issue with birth one way or the other. I never have. I've spent 45 years of my life involved with childbirth because of the families who developed these skills. And that's important for you to know, because you could have been any of those families. We wanted something to do for ourselves. Okay? And this is where choice was really important to understand. All of us wanted to choose elements of our birth, and some people were very, very specific. But we had to ask the question, what about me? What about me? So what if I or another woman wanted to have a home birth, but we couldn't find anybody to help us, so we couldn't choose that? What if we wanted to have a cesarean, but no doctor would do a cesarean if there wasn't a medical reason? So what about me? What if we chose a list of things that we wanted and then found that 9 out of 10 of them unfolded as we wanted, but we were really pissed off about the one that didn't? What about me? What about my wanting not to have pain relief, but during the labor, I'm finding the pain so intense that I begged for it. And my husband then said to me, "But you said on your birth plan you didn't want pain relief." And I said, "You're not doing this experience. I want pain relief." And so my husband caved into my choices. And then what happened? 6 months later, I was pissed off at him. What about me? That's what families taught me, is that we had to ask that question. What about me? What about my individual birth? What about my individual situation? And how could I choose to have a birth that I wanted when it was impossible to choose the birth that I ended up having? So we found that birth choices were good because they made you think, but they weren't good in a way of planning for birth because you couldn't choose the birth you ended up having. And this is why 25, 30, 40 years later, birth plans have failed too many people. So now we find ourselves in a situation where theoretically birth skills failed too many people from achieving this natural birth and this pain-free labor, and birth choices failed women from not being able to choose the birth that they ended up having. So from our viewpoint as a trust, we have an original sin in the background, which was every woman should have been just told, be skilled. Doesn't matter what type of birth you have. Just be skilled to birth your baby and have your birth partner help you to do that. And we should have coupled birth skills with birth choices so that if people specifically wanted certain things in their birth, that's fine. But you have to have the skills to try to achieve those things. And if you don't have the skills, then you're relying on other people to achieve them for you. And they can't do that, because they really do not know what's important to you and what you're willing to just say, that really wasn't that important. So we want you to understand that birth choices have failed the question, what about me? So we want you to still choose what you want, create a birth plan, because that's a great exercise for you to think about things. But we want you to become skilled. We want you to have the skills that you put into a skills-based birth plan so that when you are birthing your baby, you are actually using your skills. So when it comes down on a simple line, bottom line, birth choices are about what you want and don't want, and birth skills are the skills you use to do the activity of how your birth unfolds. And that is profoundly a difference. So if we don't have a skilled birthing population, if we don't have skilled families, we're going to still continue to go down the road we're going down with childbirth now, which is shame, blame, guilt, anger, disappointment. Women are not having the births that they imagined. They're feeling terrible. They don't have good memories. Are babies and mothers safe? Yeah, by and large, the medical profession has made a huge difference. And we are having more medical births, which from our viewpoint is fine. We just want you guys skilled. And if skills mean that you can have a better, safer birth with better memories because of what you've done, how you've behaved, how you've coped, how you've managed, how you've dealt with, how you've worked through, worked with, stayed on top, and in control of your birth, then we know that we have achieved what Birthing Better families wanted, which was to do something for ourselves to answer that question, what about me? And it turned out that what about me meant become skilled. Talk to you later.